Strength in life does not come from how talented we are, how experienced we may be, or how hard we push ourselves. Real strength is born from connection. When the soul is disconnected from its source, even the most gifted person eventually grows weary. There is a kind of exhaustion that no amount of rest can fix, because it is not physical, it is spiritual. Many people wake up each morning already tired, not because they lack sleep, but because they are carrying life on their own shoulders. When the heart tries to function without God, effort replaces faith and striving replaces peace. There is a dangerous illusion in self-sufficiency. It convinces us that if we just try harder, plan better, or push longer, we will finally feel fulfilled. But effort without connection produces motion without progress. A branch can look strong for a moment after being separated, but eventually it dries out because life was never in the branch itself. Life was always flowing from the source. In the same way, people can appear successful on the outside while slowly drying up on the inside because they have disconnected from the presence that gives real strength. Abiding in God means recognizing that strength is not something we generate, it is something we receive. When we remain connected to Him, strength flows naturally, peace replaces panic, clarity replaces confusion, confidence replaces fear. This is not because problems disappear, but because the source sustaining us is greater than the pressure facing us. When we abide, we stop fighting battles in our own energy and begin standing in divine support. Many people confuse activity with productivity. They stay busy, but their souls remain empty. They are working, serving, building, and producing, yet they feel drained instead of fulfilled. This happens when life is lived from the outside and instead of from the inside out. Abiding in God reorders our strength. It teaches us to draw from His presence before we pour ourselves into the world. When the inner life is nourished, the outer life becomes fruitful. True strength is not loud, aggressive, or forceful. It is quiet confidence rooted in trust. It is the ability to stand firm without anxiety and move forward without fear. This kind of strength does not collapse under pressure because it was never built on human ability alone. It is sustained by daily connection, constant reliance, and unwavering trust. When we abide in God, we stop proving and start trusting. We stop pushing and start resting. We stop surviving and start living. Strength becomes steady instead of fragile. Faith becomes a lifestyle instead of a reaction. And even in moments of weakness, there is an unexplainable resilience that rises from within, not because we are strong, but because we are connected. Growth often comes through processes we do not naturally welcome. One of the most misunderstood aspects of spiritual development is pruning. Many people assume that if something is removed from their lives, it must be a sign of loss or rejection. But pruning is not about destruction, it is about redirection. It is an intentional act of care designed to produce greater strength and lasting fruit. What feels painful in the moment is often what protects the future. Pruning reveals that not everything growing is healthy. Some habits, thought patterns, and attachments may appear harmless, yet they quietly drain spiritual energy. Over time, they compete for attention. We can focus and limit growth. When God begins to remove these things, It can feel uncomfortable because familiarity is being challenged. The soul resists change, even when change is necessary, but pruning exposes what no longer serves the purpose of growth. There are seasons when God cuts away distractions that once seemed productive, activities, relationships, or goals that once brought fulfillment may suddenly feel heavy or unfruitful. This shift is not accidental. It is an invitation to refocus on what truly matters. Pruning refines priorities, aligning the heart with what produces lasting impact rather than temporary satisfaction. Many people mistake pruning for punishment because it often happens during vulnerable moments. When comfort is removed, insecurity can rise, questions surface, and doubt tries to take root. But pruning is not a response to failure. It is a response to potential. It happens not because someone is unworthy, but because they are capable of more. Growth requires space, and pruning creates that space by removing what limits expansion. Pruning also builds trust. It requires believing that what is being removed is not more valuable than what is being developed. This trust is not built overnight. It is learned through experience. As the soul begins to see that every season of cutting is followed by deeper strength and clearer direction, over time, the heart learns to submit rather than resist, recognizing that the hands shaping it are guided by wisdom and care. Spiritual pruning reshapes character. It teaches patience when progress seems slow. It cultivates humility by reminding the soul of its dependence. It strengthens faith by forcing reliance beyond comfort zones. The removal of excess creates room for deeper roots, allowing growth to withstand pressure and uncertainty. When pruning is complete, what remains is healthier and more focused. Energy is no longer wasted on what distracts or weakens. Life becomes more intentional, and fruit begins to appear in ways that are sustainable and meaningful. The pain of cutting gives way to the purpose of growth, and the soul discovers that what was removed made room for something far greater. Many people approach faith as an emergency response rather than a daily relationship. They reach for God when the pressure is high, when the tears are heavy, or when answers feel far away. In moments of crisis, prayers become urgent and sincere, but once the storm passes, connection slowly fades. This pattern creates a faith that is reactive instead of relational. It treats God like a lifeline instead of a living presence. Yet true spiritual depth is formed not in moments of desperation alone, but in daily devotion. Choosing daily connection means inviting God into ordinary moments, not just extraordinary problems. It is allowing Him to shape our thoughts before the day becomes loud, to guide our decisions before confusion sets in, and to anchor our emotions before stress takes over. When faith is practiced daily, the heart learns to recognize God's voice even when life is calm. This kind of consistency builds spiritual awareness and sensitivity, making it easier to stand firm when challenges arise. A faith that only shows up in crisis often struggles with doubt during the storm, but a faith that lives daily in God's presence carries peace into the storm. Daily connection creates spiritual memory. It reminds the soul of past faithfulness, answered prayers, and quiet moments of guidance. These memories become spiritual strength when uncertainty tries to shake confidence. When we walk with God daily, trust is not forced. it is familiar. Daily connection also transforms obedience from obligation into desire. Instead of following God out of fear or pressure, the heart begins to follow Him out of love and trust. Time spent in His presence softens the inner life. Pride gives way to humility. Impatience gives way to understanding. Fear gives way to assurance. The soul becomes aligned with God's will, not because it is commanded, but because it is connected. There is a difference between visiting a place and living there. A visitor observes, but a resident belongs. When faith becomes a place we visit occasionally, it remains distant. But when faith becomes the place we live, it shapes everything. Daily connection means God is present in conversations, choices, reactions, and priorities. It means faith is not limited to prayer time, but carried into every part of life. This kind of consistent relationship does not eliminate struggle, but it changes how struggle is faced. Instead of panic, there is prayer. Instead of frustration, there is trust. Instead of isolation, there is awareness of God's nearness. The soul learns to lean instead of collapse. Over time, daily connection builds spiritual maturity, making faith resilient rather than fragile. Choosing daily connection is a quiet decision made repeatedly. It is waking up and acknowledging God before the world demands attention. It is pausing to listen before reacting. It is remaining aware of His presence even when life feels ordinary. And in that daily abiding, faith stops being seasonal and becomes a steady living relationship. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when effort alone is no longer enough. It is the moment when working harder does not bring peace, striving longer does not bring clarity, and pushing forward only increases exhaustion. This is the moment when self-effort reaches its limit. Many people are worn down not because they lack faith, but because they are trying to carry what was never meant to be carried alone. They are attempting to produce spiritual results with human strength, and the weight becomes unbearable. Surrendering self-effort does not mean giving up responsibility. It means releasing control. It is the recognition that while effort has a place, it cannot replace dependence. Faith begins where self-sufficiency ends. When people rely solely on their own understanding, they often confuse activity with obedience. They stay busy, but they are not always aligned. True alignment comes when effort is submitted to God's direction rather than driven by personal pressure. Self-effort often produces anxiety because it places outcomes entirely on human shoulders. When success becomes dependent on personal strength alone, fear of failure grows. Every mistake feels heavier and every delay feels threatening, but surrender shifts the burden. It allows the heart to trust that outcomes are not solely determined by human capability, but guided by divine wisdom. Peace enters when the soul accepts that it is not in charge of everything, and it was never meant to be. Surrender also brings clarity. When self-effort dominates, decisions are often rushed and reactions are driven by fear. But when control is released, there is space to listen. Direction becomes clearer because the noise of pressure is removed. God's guidance is often quiet, and it is easily drowned out by frantic striving. Surrender creates room for discernment, allowing choices to be shaped by faith rather than urgency. Many resist surrender because they associate it with weakness. In truth, Surrender requires great strength. It takes courage to admit limitations, to stop pretending control, and to trust beyond understanding. Surrender is not passive, it is active trust. It is choosing obedience even when the path is unclear and believing that God's power is sufficient where human strength fails. When self-effort is surrendered, growth becomes sustainable. Instead of burning out, the soul learns to rest while still moving forward. Progress continues, but it is fueled by grace rather than pressure. The heart becomes lighter and joy returns because life is no longer treated as a performance to be maintained, but as a relationship to be trusted. Surrender reconnects faith to its source. It shifts the focus from what the individual can achieve to what God can accomplish through willing hearts. And in that surrender, power is renewed, purpose is clarified, and the soul discovers that it was never meant to strive alone. A life that is truly connected to God naturally begins to reflect His character. Fruit is not something that is forced. It is something that forms when the inner life is healthy. Many people try to display spiritual qualities through effort alone, but lasting fruit grows from relationship, not performance. When the heart remains rooted in God, transformation happens quietly, shaping attitudes, responses, and desires over time. Spiritual fruit is revealed most clearly in everyday situations. It shows up in patience when frustration would be easier. It appears in kindness when harshness feels justified. It becomes evident in peace when circumstances are uncertain. These qualities are not signs of weakness. They are evidence of strength under control. They reflect a heart that trusts God enough to respond differently than the world expects. Love is one of the clearest fruits of a connected life. Not a shallow affection, but a steady, intentional care for others. This kind of love does not depend on convenience or agreement. It remains present even when misunderstood or unappreciated. It chooses compassion over judgment and understanding over reaction. Such love reveals God's nature through human actions, making faith visible rather than theoretical. Peace is another fruit that stands out in a restless world. It is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of trust. This peace steadies the heart when pressure rises and keeps the mind anchored when uncertainty threatens stability. It allows individuals to move through challenges without being consumed by them. Peace reflects confidence in God's guidance. Even when outcomes are unknown, faithfulness grows as fruit as well. It shows up in consistency, reliability, and perseverance. It is the quiet commitment to continue trusting, serving, and believing even when results are delayed. Faithfulness resists discouragement and remains steady through seasons of waiting. It reflects a deep belief that what God has promised will unfold in its time. Self-control is often overlooked, yet it is a powerful reflection of God's work within. It governs emotions, words, and actions, preventing impulse from ruling behavior. This restraint is not suppression. It is discipline guided by wisdom. It allows individuals to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally, reflecting maturity and spiritual depth. As these fruits develop, life becomes a living testimony. Actions align with beliefs. Words carry weight because they are backed by character. Faith becomes visible not through loud declarations, but through consistent behavior. The fruit produced is not for personal display, but for the benefit of others. It nourishes relationships, strengthens communities, and points hearts toward the source of true transformation.